as she was buried up to her neck for being infertile, but still dared to look the world in the eye. Nobody ever asked her name. They just knew she'd been buried up to her neck for not being able to bear children, while the whole town turned away. One widowed rancher and his 2 young daughters pulled her out of the dust. She didn't speak much, but the way she stepped onto his porch changed every wild tale that followed. Some folks say that's where the story really began. The wind at Beaver Gap didn't howl. It cut, thin and sharp as a barber's blade. Emery Callahan pulled his coat tighter and gave a nudge to the mule. His boy Ansel was riding up ahead, hunched low like a rider twice his age. The little one, June, sat curled in the back of the wagon, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like her mother. That smell was fading now. Emery hadn't meant to bring the kids through the pass, but the spring had run dry again, and the cattle were pawing mud for water. This shortcut shaved off a half day, maybe more, but folks didn't like crossing Beaver Gap in winter. Not since the thing with the preacher's boy. They were just rounding the sharp bend near the hollow when June sat up, squinting through the frost-fogged air. "Daddy," she said, her voice flat, "there's a lady in the snow." Emery didn't stop right away. Kids say things. See clouds shaped like dogs, see ghosts in trees. But June's voice didn't wobble like it usually did when she was fooling. It dropped like a stone. Ansel reined in. "Where?" "Right there," June pointed, her mittened hand stiff like she didn't want to look too long. A ridge of snow sat a few yards off the path. Nothing strange about that, unless you noticed the curve of a shoulder, the tip of an ear peeking from under a crust of white, and something else, the faintest puff of breath, slow and shallow, curling up into the morning air. Emery was off his horse before the mule stopped. His boots cracked through the top layer of snow as he knelt. A woman, buried up to her neck, her lips blue, her eyes closed, lashes iced over. Her skin had the waxy tint of someone halfway gone, but her throat moved. "Ansel!" Emery snapped. "Get the rope and that red blanket now!" The boy ran without asking. Emery started scooping snow with his bare hands, then switched to the edge of his hat. When his fingers went numb, June slid from the wagon and crouched nearby, eyes wide. "She's real," she whispered. "Yeah," Emery said, "she's real." And somebody wanted her dead. Beneath the top crust, the snow had been packed down with purpose. There were handprints, boot marks, shoveling from above, not collapse from a storm. He saw where something had been stuck into the snow at her feet. Maybe a marker. Ansel returned, his breath hard and fast. Together they dug until Emery could pull her up under the arms. She sagged like wet cloth. No name, no cry, just a faint whimper as her head lolled against Emery's chest. Folded in her lap, how it stayed there, he didn't know, was a scrap of coarse linen, the kind women used for dish drying. Stitching crooked but clear. "I'm cursed. I'm barren. Please don't save me." Emery read it once. Then he tucked it away without a word. They wrapped her tight, loaded her onto the wagon. Between the hay and the extra saddle, Emery didn't speak again till they were moving. "You don't tell a soul about this," he told Ansel. "Not the sheriff, not Preacher Harlan, nobody." Ansel just nodded. June held the woman's hand all the way back through the pass, never asking once why someone would bury a lady alive. Emery knew why. And if the wind at Beaver Gap had a voice that morning, it sure as hell wasn't talking. The cabin sat at the edge of Split-Tooth Creek, where the cottonwoods bent from wind and nobody came unless they were lost or meant to be. Emery's place wasn't much, a low-roofed shape of gray boards and black pipe smoke, but it had heat, dry floors, and coffee that didn't lie. He carried the woman in like a sack of oats, gentle but without a fuss. She hadn't stirred since they'd dug her out. Didn't make a sound even when the fire licked her toes warm again. June laid a blanket on the cot. "She gonna wake up, Daddy?" "She better," he said, "else we hauled back a corpse." Ansel handed him the tin of salt. "You think she's really cursed?" Emery cut a glare at him. "I think some men call anything they don't understand a curse. That don't make it true." She lay still as a stump. Her skin was bruised in strange places, both wrists, back of the neck, behind the knees. That last part stopped Emery cold. Whoever did this knew how to keep a person still. Trained hands, maybe military, maybe worse. He put salt in warm water, dabbed it gently on her lips. June took over with quiet, careful hands. She wasn't old enough to know cruelty, but she'd seen its shadow more than once. By sundown the woman stirred, not a word, not a sound, just a twitch of her brow and a flicker behind her eyes. She looked around the room like a rabbit in a foxtrap. Then she met Emery's eyes, and blinked once. "Name?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Need to call you something." Still nothing. "You're safe," June said softly. That brought her gaze to the girl. Something in her jaw softened just a bit, but she still wouldn't speak. Ansel tried. "You hungry?" No reply. Emery stood, poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to the boy. "Let her be." She sat upright that night, didn't sleep, just stared into the dark corner like something in it whispered to her. Didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even shake. The strong ones did that, sat in the quiet, like they were built from stone. Next morning, the girl watched June peel potatoes and Ansel clean the rifle. When Emery stepped out to split wood, she finally spoke. One word. "Why?" He looked over his shoulder, slow. "Why what?" "Why'd you pull me out?" He spit in the dirt and went back to swinging the axe. "'Cause my daughter saw you, that's it." "That all?" "Number, but it's enough." Inside, she sat very still, her hands twisted in her lap. Her voice, when it came again, was low and bitter. "They said I wasn't a woman." June, sitting close by, blinked. "They said I was a bad omen, unfit for marriage, for children, for land." Emery didn't turn around, just muttered. "Sounds like talk of men with too much time and not enough spine." She looked toward the door, toward him. "You a preacher?" He gave a short bark of a laugh. "Hell no." "Then why the mercy?" He paused, then said without turning, "I don't do mercy. I do what's right." She didn't answer, but her hands, once clawed in her lap, started to loosen. That night, she slept. Emery poured 3 cups of coffee the next morning. Nobody asked why. 3 days later, the smoke came before the man. Juniper and mesquite, burning low, rolling scent over Split-Tooth Creek like a warning too quiet to heed. Emery smelled it while stringing wire at the back pasture. He froze mid-loop, eyes on the northern ridge. "Someone's upwind," he muttered. Ansel dropped the spool. "You sure?" Emery didn't answer, just unlatched the rifle from his back and walked home with dust in his boots and tension in every step. The woman, they called her Delaney now after June's favorite storybook heroine, was feeding the chickens, slow but steady. Her silence was no longer haunted, just careful. He called out, "Inside." Now. She didn't ask why. She moved. June looked up from the basin. "What's wrong?" "Could be nothing. Could be someone sniffing around." Ansel fetched the rifle like he'd been drilled. Emery sat on the porch, eyes scanning. The horizon stayed empty, but the wind tasted wrong. Then came the horse, big, chestnut, saddle worn slick, and the man on it, thin, tall, coat too nice for ranch country, mustache trimmed like he'd never held a shovel. He rode easy, like he owned the land and the weather. Emery didn't stand. The man reined in 10 feet out. "Evenin'." "Not yet," Emery said flatly. The stranger smiled. "Fair point." "You lost?" "No, sir. I reckon I'm exactly where I ought to be." His voice held honey. and vinegar behind it. Emery lifted his coffee, didn't sip, just said, "Name." "Bryce Laramie. I do business out of Pender's Bluff. That town's 30 miles east. Still counts." "What kind of business?" Bryce leaned forward on the saddle horn, eyes narrowing. "The kind where folks pay me to find things. Missing cattle. Missing gold. Missing women." No one moved. The wind did that thing it does when trouble's thinking about stepping inside. "You seen one?" Bryce asked, smiling like it was a joke. "I seen a lot of things," Emery replied. "What I ain't seen is a reason you're still on my land." Bryce's eyes flicked past him, toward the cabin, toward the smoke from the chimney, toward a shadow behind the curtain. His smile widened. "I hear tell one of them tribal towns done executed a woman for bad luck, only she didn't stay buried." Emery stood now. "Word travels fast," he said. "It does when there's coin behind it." June opened the door just a crack. Emery snapped, "Back inside." Bryce didn't blink. "You're hiding her," he said. "Am I? See, here's the thing." Bryce swung down from the horse, slow, casual. His boots landed like punctuation. "You might think this is about justice or some moral calling, but it ain't." "What's it about then?" Emery asked. "Debt. She ran from a trade. Broke the balance. There's men paid a price for her running. They want that price returned. She ain't property." Bryce smiled wider. "Then why'd you dig her up like she was gold?" Silence, thick as old molasses. Emery raised the rifle just enough to let the barrel catch light. Bryce didn't flinch. "I'll be back, with men. You got till tomorrow to change your mind." He mounted and turned. Just before he rode out of sight, he said without looking back, "She ain't yours to keep, rancher." Inside, Delaney sat at the table, fists clenched. Her voice, calm, cut the quiet. "You should have let them finish me." "No," Emery said. "Why not?" He looked at her, real and slow. "Because men like him don't get to write the last page." The sound of hooves faded, but the silence that followed was heavier. Emery didn't move for a long while. Rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the ridge where Bryce had vanished. Then he stood and stepped inside. June was trying not to cry. She stirred stew that didn't need stirring. Delaney sat still, straight-backed. She wasn't looking at anyone, like she'd folded herself small so no one could find the shame still clinging to her skin. Ansel leaned near the window, biting his nail. "They comin', ain't they?" he asked. Emery nodded once. "Sundown tomorrow." "Should we run?" June asked soft. "No." "Why not?" Delaney said, voice tighter than barbed wire. Emery knelt by the stove, added 2 logs. "I ran once, still hear the echoes." Then he stood. "We make choices, and we stay with them." Delaney looked at him. "You chose wrong." "I usually do." Ansel cracked a half-smile at that, but it didn't last. They spent the rest of the day nailing shut the gaps in the barn, moving the horses deeper into the canyon. Emery opened a floorboard under the hearth and pulled out a canvas sack, shells wrapped in oiled cloth. Delaney watched all of it, silent. That night they ate quietly. The stew was better than expected. No one mentioned it. After the table was cleared, June brought out a battered Bible and sat by Delaney. Ma used to read it when Pa got mean. Delaney stared at the girl. "I ain't your ma." "I know." Silence. Then Delaney reached out, took the book, and held it like she might remember how. Emery sat on the porch alone until the moon climbed high. He held a cup that had long gone cold. He didn't notice Delaney until she spoke. "You ever killed a man?" "More than I liked. Fewer than I could have." She sat beside him. "They'll come. You know that." "I counted on it." "What if you die?" He looked at her. "Then make sure they bury me boots off." She raised a brow. "Why boots off?" He sipped. so they know I died standing on my own porch, not running like some mangy coyote." She didn't laugh, but she didn't flinch either. "I don't belong here." "You do now." "Why, just because you dug me up?" "No," he said, standing, "'cause my daughter thinks you do." That landed. As he turned to go in, she asked, "What's her name?" "June." "And the boy?" "Ansel." She paused. Then, "Mine's Cora." He stopped in the doorway. "No, it ain't," he said. Her eyes narrowed. He continued, matter of fact, "Cora died in that hole." Then he looked her dead in the eyes. "You better figure out who's going to live." He stepped inside and closed the door. She stayed out there a while longer. When she came in, she left her boots on the porch. At first light, the ranch looked like it always had. Gray wood, thin smoke from the chimney, silence hanging like frost. But everything was different now. Cora stood in the yard, hands deep in a bucket of feed. Chickens circled her boots like nothing in the world was wrong. June came up beside her, carrying a chipped tin pail full of water. "You ever held a lamb?" June asked. Cora shook her head. "They don't fight you, not like folks do when they're scared. They just give in." Cora didn't answer. She dropped the feed and walked back inside. Emery was in the barn, cinching the saddle tighter on the black gelding. Ansel watched from the doorway. "You gonna ride out?" "Nope," Emery said. "Just need the horses close." "Close for what?" "Bad men coming. You don't send your horses out to pasture when the wind smells like fire." Ansel nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. "Can I shoot?" the boy asked. Emery looked at him for a long time. "You ever killed something?" "A coyote. Hit it with a rock once." "That's not killing. That's luck." Ansel dropped his gaze. "Still wanna help." Emery handed him a small sack of cartridges. "Then you stay low, stay quiet, and don't shoot unless you see my hat fall." "What if you're already dead?" "Then you run." By mid-morning, the place looked like a stage set for violence. Emery had strung up tripwires along the gulch, wedged buckshot into cracks near the fence posts, and cleaned the rifles until they looked too clean to be from this world. Cora stood by the porch, watching. "You really think 6 men will come for one woman?" "I think it don't take but one to set a whole town on fire." "You're risking those kids for me." He looked at her. "You ain't the reason. You just the excuse." That evening the sound came. A slow, dragging creak of wagon wheels through gravel. Emery stepped onto the porch, rifle slung. A single buggy rolled up, 2 horses hitched, and Bryce Nolan sitting up front with a toothpick in his mouth and hell behind his eyes. 2 more riders followed. Not 6, not yet. Bryce stopped 20 feet from the house. "You got something of mine, Mr. Bishop," he called. "I got nothing belongs to you," Emery replied. Bryce smiled. "See, that's the part I find funny." Silence. Then a soft voice from inside the house. "I'll go." It was Cora. She stepped onto the porch, face calm like she'd rehearsed it in her bones. "I'll go," she said again. "Just don't hurt them." Emery didn't even look at her. "Back inside," Bryce laughed. "Well, look at that. She speaks like a lady now. Ain't that something?" The wind carried the scent of iron and dust. Then Emery's voice, sharp as a nail. "You've got till the count of 3. Bryce blinked. "Say again." 1. Bryce stood. 2. The riders began shifting in their saddles. 3. Thunder cracked. No clouds in the sky. Just the echo of Emery's Henry rifle. The lead slug hitting Bryce's thigh like a hammer on bone. The man dropped sideways, screaming. The 2 riders spurred forward. Cora moved without thinking, grabbed Ansel, and shoved him behind the doorframe. June screamed, then another shot, and another, and suddenly, the porch was a different place, a place where lambs were hidden behind stone walls, and guns spoke first. When the smoke cleared, 2 horses ran without riders. One man crawled into the brush, dragging his leg like dead meat. Bryce Nolan lay groaning in the dust, blood soaking through his trouser leg like oil under wagon wheels. Emery reloaded, didn't rush it, didn't flinch. Cora stepped out again. She didn't shake this time. "You killed them." "One's still breathing," Emery said, not looking at her. "That'll be his mistake." Bryce coughed and laughed all in one. "You think this is it?" he spat. "You think I came alone?" Emery stared at the man. "Number, I think you came first, so I could bury you first." And with that, he turned his back on the crippled outlaw and walked toward the barn. By dusk, the graves were 3, shallow and wide. Ansel stood nearby, holding the shovel, even though it dragged on the ground like it weighed more than his hopes. "You sure we gotta do it?" the boy asked. "Burying them like men?" "No," Emery said, still digging. "Ain't about them, it's about us." He paused, looked over at the porch. Cora stood with June in her arms, quiet, watching the dirt rise like smoke from a fire that wouldn't go out. Later, they stood in silence while Emery spoke the only words he knew for the dead. They lived by the gun, they died by it. Lord, forgive the rest of us. No hymns, no names, just dirt. Then came the moment no one spoke of, but all felt. The ranch, Wheatstone Hollow, was no longer a place outside of trouble. It was in it now, part of it, marked. That night, thunder rolled in. Real thunder this time. Cora lit a lamp inside the cabin. Her hands didn't shake anymore. "You should have let me go," she said, voice soft. "No," Emery answered. "You don't know what's coming. I got 2 kids in the other room. I always know what's coming." She stepped toward him, slow. "And if they bring more, then I put more in the ground." Silence hung like wet clothes on a line, heavy, tired. "I wasn't always like this," she whispered. "I don't need you to be anything else," he replied. In the corner, June stirred in her sleep. Ansel sat up, hugging his knees. "Are we safe?" he asked the air. Cora heard him but didn't answer. Instead, she walked out onto the porch, looked up at the stars breaking through the clouds. Then she whispered a name to the wind, a name nobody else heard, a name no one had called her in years. Next morning, Emery rode to town, left at dawn, said nothing, just saddled up and disappeared over the ridge like he'd done it 1,000 times. Cora stood at the window. She waited. June asked where he went. "To buy salt," Cora lied, but she knew better. He went to find out how many more men were coming. He went to see if the devil had mailed word ahead. He went to see if God still listened west of the canyon. Dry River Town always felt like a secret whispered too loud. One main street, a saloon that smelled like sweat and gun oil, a post office with a faded flag, and a jailhouse that looked like no one had ever made it out sober or innocent. Emery tied his horse outside the sheriff's office. He didn't knock, just walked in, spurs echoing like gunshots, in the still. Sheriff Amos Laird looked up, chewing a piece of jerky with no real interest in justice. "Well, I'll be. Emery Rigg. Thought you stopped coming to town when the preacher stopped preaching." "I didn't come to talk sermons." "No," Laird said, tossing the jerky in the trash. "You came with trouble tied to your saddle." Emery laid 3 names on the desk, spoke them plain: Bryce Nolan, Wade Krieg, Tanner Holt. Laird blinked slow. "That's so. They came to my ranch." "Alive?" "No." The sheriff leaned back. "Well, that's mighty unfortunate for someone. Ain't asking permission, Amos. I'm telling you, more are coming. Then maybe it's time you pack up and head out." Emery's jaw tensed. "I got 2 kids sleeping in that house, and a woman who don't deserve to be buried twice." Laird stared. "You talking about that girl they tried to hang out by Devil's Notch?" "She's got a name." "Yeah. So did the one she shot, Emery." The saloon was quieter than it should have been. Poker chips paused midair when Emery stepped in. Every head turned, not out of fear, just the kind of stillness men carry when they feel a storm, but can't see the sky. Behind the bar stood Lenny Griggs, old, wrinkled, and half-deaf. "You drinking or digging graves today, Rig?" "Both, maybe," Emery said, sliding a photo across the counter. "You seen him?" Lenny squinted. "That's Denton Krieg. Kinda Wade, brother, meaner, carries a knife carved from a buffalo horn and a grudge big as Nebraska. Where is he?" "Last heard he was south, near Candleback Ridge." Emery finished his drink in one burn and stood. Someone from the back called out, "You protecting that barren witch like she's your own?" The room fell still again. Emery didn't turn around. He just said, "Careful." That word already cost 3 men their boots and blood. The chair scraped. The man didn't stand. Back at the ranch, Cora watched the horizon. June braided weeds into a crown. Ansel cleaned Emery's old rifle with hands too young for that weight. Cora didn't stop him. Instead, she sat by the window, tracing the scar on her wrist like it held all the stories no one would ever ask her to tell. Then, hooves. Not one, not many, just one horse, fast and wild. A boy no older than Ansel jumped off, breath ragged. "Is this Wheatstone Hollow?" Cora nodded. He pulled a folded paper from his vest. "Someone paid me 2 silver pieces to ride this here and nowhere else." She opened it. Inside was a sketch. A-O, face, heron beneath it, one word, wanted. Emery rode back with dusk on his shoulders and dust in his teeth. The boy's horse was still tied out front. Cora met him on the porch with that paper in her hand. No need for talk. He just nodded once, slow. "I didn't know they had artists in hell," she said, voice flat. "Whoever drew this, they've seen you up close." "How close?" "Close enough to hate you by name." She folded the poster without looking. "So that's who I am now, not Cora, just the woman worth 2 ounces of silver and a bullet in the head." Emery stepped forward, real quiet. "No one's gonna collect." He called the kids in. June looked at him like she already knew. She always did. Ansel sat by the fire, clutching the same rifle he'd cleaned that morning. Too polished for a boy, too small for a man. "I need y'all to listen," Emery said. "There's folks comin' and they ain't interested in talkin'." Cora spoke low, careful. "They'll burn it down. Everything. Let 'em try." "No," she said. "Let me leave." "No." "You don't owe me, Emery. I buried the mother of my children right on that ridge. You think I don't know what it means to protect a name?" The fire crackled. Something outside howled. Then quiet again. 3 riders came that night, not loud, not stupid. They knew the land. Rode under moonlight like ghosts with pistols. Emery was waiting in the barn. First shot dropped one off his horse, like a sack of dry meat. Second rider bolted for the side. Emery didn't chase, didn't have to. Ansel was behind the well. The boy's hands shook, but the aim was true. 1 shot, then silence again. The third rider didn't show his face, just left a mark. A knife driven into the fence post with a piece of Cora's old dress tied to the hilt. At dawn, the sheriff rode out alone. He didn't ask permission, just knocked once and stood with his hat in his hands. "That girl," he said, "she's got more folks after her than a bounty can explain." Emery leaned in the doorway. "Then maybe it ain't about money," Laird spat. "You think this is noble? You're dragging 2 kids into a noose. I'm teaching them what kind of man not to be." The sheriff stared at him for a long, hard moment, then tossed down a tin star on the porch rail. "I ain't your law no more." And with that, Dry River had no sheriff, but Wheatstone Hollow had a war coming. The wind changed. Not the kind you notice with flags or smoke, but the kind that made dogs whine and old bones ache. That evening, Emery was sharpening a blade that hadn't seen blood in years. "Are you going to kill them all?" June asked from the doorway. He didn't answer, just looked up and said, "Get some sleep, but you won't." "No." Cora sat at the end of the porch with her hands folded tight, knuckles white. She hadn't spoken since the sheriff left. Her voice was different now, quieter, like she was trying not to wake a memory. "I used to pray," she said, "that if I couldn't give life, at least let me not be the reason someone lost theirs." Emery kept his eyes on the horizon. "Prayin' ain't stoppin' what's comin'." "I know," she said, "but maybe not prayin' is worse." By noon the next day, more signs came. A crow nailed to the fence. Tracks, deep, deliberate, just close enough to be seen, and a single boot print by the watering trough, barely sunk, almost like it wanted to be found. Emery didn't say much, but he changed the pattern of the patrol, and he moved the kids' beds into the root cellar. That night Cora asked him, "You ever been hunted before?" He nodded. "Wasn't for being barren, though." She gave a small laugh. "Lucky you." When the attack came, it didn't start with guns. It started with fire. The barn lit up like a dry pine caught lightning. Horses screamed. Ansel tried to run out the door, but Emery yanked him back with one arm, shoving a shotgun into the boy's hands. "You shoot only when they're inside the gate, not before." June was already down in the cellar, holding her doll like it could bleed. Cora stood beside Emery now. No dress, no apron, just pants, boots, and a Colt Navy revolver she hadn't touched in 5 years. They came in threes, silent, mean, not bounty hunters. These were churchgoers on Sunday and killers after dark. One called out, "We don't want your land, just the curse walkin' your porch." Cora stepped forward. "I ain't hidin'." Emery raised the rifle. "Neither are we." The first shot cracked like God's teeth breaking. The second was Cora's. Someone dropped, then screaming, then gunpowder coated the night air. When it ended, 4 men lay twisted across Emery's field. Another crawled away into brush, trailing 1 boot and a lot of blood. Emery turned to Cora. "You all right?" She nodded. "That one, the loudest. He wasn't there for money." "I know. He called me sister." Emery said nothing, just watched as the fire died in the barn and a long silence fell on the house, the kind that comes after thunder. The barn smoldered for 2 days. Emery didn't bother putting it out. What wasn't burnt was ash-colored anyway. Cora buried the men herself. Said their blood had cursed enough ground already. She didn't mark their graves, didn't say a prayer, just shoveled like she'd done it before. June asked, "Aren't we supposed to say something?" Cora paused, looked at the black dirt. "They said enough while breathing." Sheriff Dobbins came by late that week. He rode alone. No badge showing, no smile either. "Word is," he said, "your land's been real noisy." Emery leaned against the doorframe. "Land's got a mouth this season." The sheriff looked at the patched barn, the scorched field. "Ya harborin' her." "You know who she is?" Emery asked. Dobbins didn't blink. "Enough to know what happens when women stop being useful. Folks get scared, and scared folks do dumb things." Cora stepped out. "I ain't hiding." Dobbins nodded slowly. "You're smart. You should disappear." "Already did once," she said. "Didn't work out so well." That night, Emery sat on the porch, carving a piece of mesquite wood down to a handle. Cora brought out 2 cups of coffee. She didn't sit. "Your kids," she said. They're fine. They need someone steady. They got me." "You're steady like a storm front, Emery." He looked at her hard. "You leavin'?" "I should, but you won't." She didn't answer. By morning she was gone. Left no note, took no food, just the old saddle from the barn, and a rifle missing a front sight. June cried. Ansel didn't. He just stared at the empty rocking chair like it owed him a reason. Emery stood a long while at the gate, hands in pockets, dust in his throat. When the mailman came, he asked, "You lose someone?" Emery shook his head. Number she just knew when to disappear. The chair stayed right where she used to sit. No one touched it. Not June, not Ansel, certainly not Emery. Dust settled on the armrest, soft as ash. A strand of hair caught in a crack of wood, fluttered once in the wind, then stopped. No one spoke about her leaving. That was the rule in the house. You didn't speak about things that made silence throb. Emery still made 2 cups of coffee in the morning, one always cooled untouched. Ansel would look at it sometimes, eyes dark and knowing. June once asked if she'd come back. "People like her," Emery said, "they come back only if the land forgives them." Did it? He didn't answer. Fall came fast that year. The wind changed early, smelled like bones and rust. Emery took to fixing things he didn't care about, restringing the clothesline, patching a fence no cow had touched in months, repainting the shutters that barely clung on. He wasn't mending a home, he was mending memory. At the store in Carver's Hollow, folks talked, said the man with the burned barn looked more bent these days, said his eyes followed the horizon too much for someone with roots. Sheriff Dobbins passed him once by the dry creek. Didn't stop. Just tipped his hat. "I heard," the sheriff called over his shoulder, "sometimes people leave to keep you safe. Other times they leave so you don't have to make a choice." Emery stared after him, didn't even nod. One night, Ansel climbed up on the porch with a blanket, laid it over the rocking chair. "Just in case," he muttered. "In case what?" Emery asked. "In case she gets cold, if she ever comes back." The wind shifted, and for a second, just 1 second, the chair creaked. The dress didn't belong to anyone no more. June found it one afternoon, deep in the cedar chest under Ma's old quilts. It was the one she wore the day the town buried her neck deep in sand and shame. The color had faded, but not the memory. That kind of cloth don't forget. June held it up, sleeves limp. "Why'd she keep this?" Emery looked up from the table, knife halfway through an apple. He didn't blink. "She kept it so she'd remember," he said. "Or maybe so she wouldn't." That night June washed it in the creek. Didn't ask, just did it. And when she came back, she didn't hang it on the line like other clothes. She hung it on the porch beam, facing the house. Backwards, Ansel stood there staring at it a long time. Then muttered, "That don't make sense." "It ain't supposed to," June said. It's not for us." The next morning it was gone. Not blown off, not stolen. Gone like it never hung there. No one said a thing at breakfast, but Emery's eyes kept drifting to the spot, and for the first time in weeks, he poured only 1 cup of coffee. That afternoon they heard the horse. Old hooves. Cautious. Not galloping, not running, just trying. June peeked from the window. The figure in the saddle was thin, burned from the sun. Shoulders sloped like someone who'd spent too many nights not sleeping. The woman wore no hat. Her face was tight with something more than windburn. Her hands gripped the reins like they were the only thing keeping her alive. June whispered, "Is that her?" Ansel didn't breathe. Emery didn't stand. He didn't need to. The horse stopped at the gate. She looked up at the porch, not at Emery, not at the kids, just at the spot where the dress had hung. Then she nodded once. "Mind if I wash my hands?" she asked, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And Emery, who hadn't spoken all day, said, "Water's in the basin. Soap's next to the nail." That night, no one talked. She ate quietly, sitting on the edge of her old chair, not quite touching it, and when June offered her a blanket, she said, "Only if it's the blue one." The one she left behind. The one Emery never let anyone else use. She stayed. Didn't ask for a room. Didn't ask for why. She just stayed. At dawn, she was already at the stove, warming up beans with a quietness like she'd never left. Ansel came in, boots unlaced, holding a dead rabbit by the feet. Their eyes met. "Thought you hated morning," he said. "I still do," she replied, "but I hate cold breakfast worse." June watched them both like she was staring at a painting that didn't make sense yet, then asked, "What's your name?" The woman turned. "Call me Ruth." It wasn't her name before, but nobody corrected it. Later that day, Emery found her out back. She was splitting wood, badly, her wrists too thin, shoulders wrong for the swing. But she kept at it, every strike saying something she wasn't ready to. He watched for a moment, then said, "You can talk, you know." Ruth didn't stop, didn't even flinch. "Talkin' is for folks who got things worth sayin'." By supper, she'd stitched up Lena's old dress, helped May with her hair, and mended the rip in Emery's flannel coat. None of it was asked. She didn't sit at the table, but she stood nearby, eating off a plate in her hands like a hired girl. And when Emery nodded toward the empty chair beside him, she said, "That ain't mine no more." Night came hard like truths you can't bury. June couldn't sleep. She walked past the girls' room and saw Ruth sitting at the end of May's bed, not talking, not rocking, just being. When June crept closer, Ruth whispered without turning, "I remember the day she was born, pink like a sunrise no one expected." "You're her ma?" June asked, voice barely there. "No," Ruth said, "but I bled for her." And that was enough. Next morning, Emery found a bundle outside his door. Inside, a note. "For what I broke, not what I took." Beneath it, the scarf May had once tied around Ruth's wrist when she was too weak to stand. He sat there for a long time, holding that scarf like it weighed more than his rifle. Nobody saw her leave. But the dogs didn't bark, and the gate didn't squeak, and the wind didn't blow. It was Sunday when the sheriff came, not with a posse, just him, hat low, boots muddy, voice flat. "Looking for a woman," he said, not even greeting. Emery stood at the porch rail, his girls watching from inside. June behind the curtain. No one said a word. "She's a thief," the sheriff continued. "She's a liar, and she was supposed to hang 2 weeks back." "She's gone," Emery said. "Gone where?" "Don't reckon she told me." The sheriff stepped onto the first stair. "She robbed the town's future. You harbor in her means you part of it." Emery didn't flinch. "You ever see a child with fever and no name?" he asked. "What's that got to do with—" "You ever bury your own voice in the dirt because no one wanted to hear it? You ever have a woman crawl out of that grave and still offer you the last piece of bread?" The sheriff stepped back. Didn't say more, didn't have to. He left. That night it rained, the kind of rain that doesn't wash anything clean, just makes the dirt stick harder. Emery stood outside in it. Let it soak into his collar, his sleeves, the scar across his ribs. The girls were asleep. June, too, but one chair on the porch stayed dry because he'd roofed it, just in case. Winter came soft that year, and when the snow settled in dried drifts around the barn, June found a little wooden box tucked behind the porch beam. Inside, a scarf, a dried thistle flower, and a coin not worth much, worn smooth. Under it all, a paper scrap scrawled in the kind of hand that tried too hard to be neat. "You let me live." That's all I ever wanted. Years passed, the gate rusted, the barn leaned, the porch sagged, but every Sunday, Emery set a second plate. Every December, June wrapped an extra gift. And every spring, May planted one row of forget-me-nots near the back fence. No one said her name, but no one ever filled that chair either. That's the thing about love, the kind that ain't sweet, ain't right, ain't clean. It doesn't leave marks folks can see. It just stays where she once stood, where she once was almost saved, where someone finally let her belong.